So this video is a little bit different than what I normally do here. Um, but this is a school project I worked on that I thought was actually pretty cool and pretty interesting. So making a video here for you guys, just because I think it's cool. So this is an NBA player salary valuation analysis I did. This was for one of my sports analytics classes. Obviously, my motivation for this is I like basketball and I'm a cheap man. So this combines to form an exhaustive computational investigation of the correlation between physical remuneration and on-court efficiency, utilizing extreme gradient boosting for the 2024-2025 National Basketball Association season. So what are we doing here? We're figuring out how much people are worth. Um, what's their player performance in dollars? That's what I did here. And some of the challenges that I saw during this process were that it was very difficult to translate performance precisely into dollars. Um, there's also limitations on spending for NBA teams that aren't like hard caps, but are kind of soft caps, such as luxury tax and apron rules. And then changing rules makes good spending critical for elite franchises. So most recently, it's been the second apron has been developed, kind of adding extra penalties for those teams that go above that salary cap threshold. So how did I figure this out? What did I do? Um, what I did actually was pretty cool from my perspective. Obviously, I think it's cool, but so what we did was we took actual player salary data and player box score data. So basically, everybody's points, assists, rebounds, whatever, all those stats for a game. We throw them into an XG boost model, which for people who don't know what an XG boost model is, basically it's just a model that takes a bunch of data and gives you some predictions. So what we're doing here is we're predicting their salary based on their stats. Um, and then we're comparing that with the actual salary to see if the predicted salary is higher or lower. If the predicted salary is higher, that means they're an underpaid player. That means they're undervalued. If it's the other way, they're overvalued. So first, oh, awesome. I forgot about this. So first we group players. Um, so this on the right, this is a graph where red means you're doing more of it in that group. Blue means you're doing less of it in that group generally. There's just a bunch of stats over here. We see, everything from turnovers to defensive things like turnovers or blocks, steals to free throws attempted and free throws made. So on the left, we see that there's a bunch of kind of groups that I've assigned people based on who's in that group, what they're kind of doing, what it looks like. So you have bench level defensive rebounders, starter level, all arounders in the third group, superstar guards, and then these aren't guards necessarily in the sense of they only play point guard or shooting guard, but they're guards in the sense of they're putting up a lot of shots, handling the ball a lot, high turnovers, high assists, things like that. And then we have deep bench players. These are people who don't really see play. 3-point shooting bench players. These are just your guys who just come in, um, shoot a couple shots, probably from three, and then kind of go back to the bench. Thinking, Kevin Herter, Sam Merrill, those kind of guys probably. I think they're both in the group. Um, and then we have defensive guards. So these are kind of your grittier guards that get a lot of steals. They foul a lot. They're pretty physical, but they also get high assists, and you see that with the red. And last we have superstar bigs. Again, this isn't necessarily only centers. It includes players who play big as well. Think, you know, Giannis technically listed as a small forward, I think, but plays well above that. Players like that. So now that we have our groupings, this is what we're going to use to kind of analyze each group and see where people are valued within their own group. Because obviously, if you compare, a bench player that never gets any playing time versus like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander, obviously you're going to say Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is probably a little bit more valuable. So it's just comparing apples to apples. Here's what we're trying to do when we're grouping these players. And then here is the graph. So it looks like a lot at first, but let's look at the graph on the left here. So on the left side, we see this entire graph, we see salary and salary difference. So the difference is that actual minus predicted salary that I mentioned earlier. Players on the right are overvalued, meaning that their actual salary is way higher than their predicted salary. Players on the left are undervalued, meaning that their um, actual salary is less than their predicted salary. So just kind of the overall grasp of this graph here. This is every player in the NBA, all however many, I forget how many we had, but all of them from I think it's 2024 to 2025 that we looked at. So obviously this isn't most recent, but still pretty cool. Um, so the cuts of this graph that we'll look at, so different versions of this, will filter down and look at different stuff. The most undervalued players, the most overvalued players, star guards, star bigs, and then a fun surprise at the end, and model errors as well. So let's look at most undervalued players here. So these are, as 2024-2025, most undervalued players in the NBA. A lot of these make sense. A lot of these are rookie scale contracts. You see J-Dub in the bottom left. He's one of the most undervalued. Paolo Banchero makes sense. He's taking a lot of shots. He's contributing a lot in the box score. Also, still, I believe, on his rookie contract. Wembanyama, of course, is on there as one of the most undervalued players. Zubats, funnily enough, is on there on the left side. Probably makes sense because he's had an all-star. He had an all-star season last season, so that makes sense. And then if you look way up in the top left, you see Kyrie Irving is the highest paid and most undervalued player we see here, which makes sense. He had a really good season. Obviously, they went to the finals that year. I believe that was no, that was the year before. Oops, never mind. um, yeah. Anyways, they still had a really good season, I guess. Or at least he did. So yeah, a lot of rookie scale contracts here. A lot of younger players. You see Norman Powell in here. Go Norman. Let's go. Um, but yeah, that's kind of what we're looking at. A lot of rookie scale contracts. A lot of just people that you would expect to be here. Kind of young stars on the come up, and Cam Thomas as well. No disrespect to Cam Thomas. He hasn't been getting love as of recently. Um, cool. So now we'll go to the most overvalued players. Here we see kind of a trio in the top right of Jaylen Brown, Paul George, and Jimmy Butler. Um, Given the most recent season, the season that's kind of concluding now, and as we're in the playoffs, Jaylen Brown probably maybe goes a little bit more to the left, a little more to the undervalued side, but Paul George and Jimmy Butler make sense. They have really large contracts. They're kind of older players that are maybe past their prime a little bit, and so they're not really performing at the level that they maybe got paid for. Um, Another interesting thing is we see two centers right behind those guys. I wish I had a little pointer. DeAndre Ayton and Rudy Gobert. Um, DeAndre Ayton obviously had a big contract coming from Phoenix to LA, so that makes sense there as well. Rudy Gobert, um, also significantly overvalued in this model. I think this model didn't value defense as much, and that's kind of his whole shtick is bringing a lot of defense. Um, I mean, he's a defensive system in a can, basically. So that makes sense when you think about it. That he's overvalued from a box score perspective, because a lot of the stuff he does is just kind of forcing tougher shots. It doesn't necessarily translate into points, assists, rebounds for him. We see this similar trend with kind of the little guards in the middle there, Drew Holiday, Jalen Suggs, and they're hanging out, being overvalued according to this model as well. And then obviously in the top and middle, we have Joel Embiid, Jason Tatum, and Kevin Durant. Um, yeah, we have a lot of trios in this overvalued section. Pretty interesting. Um, these three are all superstars. Jason Tatum, maybe he's sharing the load a little bit with Jaylen Brown, and so he's not worth as much. KD was a similar story with him in Phoenix. I believe he was in Phoenix at the time, and then Joel Embiid and probably with Tyrese Maxey as well, and Paul George apparently. So it makes sense. These are kind of your load sharing stars, and then you just kind of have another group here of Zach LaVine, Pascal Siakam, and Lauri Markkanen. These are guys that are just getting kind of bags on empty teams. Obviously, Pascal Siakam you know, they had that run last year, but this was before that. They were kind of just, putting up stats, getting a lot of money, but not necessarily kind of doing a whole lot there and adding to wins. Um, this is the most overvalued players. I think this one's probably the most interesting. Um, just kind of seeing what contracts are objectively, quote unquote, worse. Um, Obviously, there's caveats with every single one, but from a statistical perspective, it's cool to see that. So now let's go to superstar guards. So again, I say guards in quotes here because not all of these players are guards necessarily, but they do a lot of ball handling, do a lot of um, assisting, scoring, all that stuff. So obviously we have Jalen Brown off to the right, um, and then Jada, Paolo Banchero, and Austin Reeves down in the left. These are the two that I kind of talked about earlier. But what's interesting here is a lot of these guards are pretty well valued. A lot of them, you see the group of younger ones here on the slight left of that median point. You see Tyrese Maxey, LaMelo Ball, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. Um, undervalued, excuse me. Obviously, they're, all-star or all-NBA or MVP in the case of Shea, level guards who, maybe don't have the ability to receive as much money, either due to team constraints or time in the league or whatever it may be. And then we look over to the right, we see uh, Steph Curry up there as overvalued, quote unquote. But again, with your superstar players, you can afford to kind of pay a little bit more to keep them around because they're so impactful for winning. Um, and we see this with kind of the group of guards: Jamal Murray, Cade Cunningham, Trae Young, Tyrese Halliburton, that group as well, right below Steph. Just guards that are paid a lot, but like you can't really let Cade go if you're the Pistons. He's the center of your franchise. Tyrese Halliburton, you can't let him go. He's the center of your franchise. Jamal Murray, maybe he's in talks in the offseason, but considering Jokic is there and they're not really getting anything going. But the point here is that you can't really uh, sell on one of these guards so easily. Um, One interesting thing is that Dame, LeBron, and Anthony Edwards are almost perfectly valued, which is quite interesting. This model didn't consider injuries as part of that, so injuries and age. So Damian Lillard obviously didn't play this season. LeBron obviously is 41, 42, 41, I believe. So not that didn't consider this in this model, so they're getting paid a lot. They're obviously not contributing as much or as uh, effectively as they have in the past. So maybe they're a little bit different if we incorporated those factors into the model, but nonetheless, still interesting that when they play, they're performing about at where you'd expect. Let's see, and Luka Doncic, undervalued. Obviously, he's a superstar. Anything else interesting on this one? I think we're all good here. All right, let's move on to the superstar bigs. So again, it's bigs in quotes. Not all these players are bigs, but they play like bigs a lot of the time. Interestingly, Amen Thompson is here. He's not a big at all. He's in this group though. That's kind of again this model was built on, or the grouping was built on their stats. So we didn't have any manual input into that. It was just kind of looking at their stats to see what was coming of it. Um, the superstar bigs. The most interesting thing here for me is in that top uh, right section, right next to Karl Anthony Towns. You see a clump of Nikola Jokic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Joel Embiid, and Anthony Davis. These are four, you know, maybe with the exclusion of Anthony Davis now, three of the perennial MVP candidates that we've seen over the past couple of years. They're paid very highly, uh, and they're again a franchise cornerstone that maybe you can't really sell on. You got to pay them what they want because he's the face of your franchise. Although Giannis may be gone soon, so uh, maybe you don't pay him what he wants. Let's see who else is interesting here. We have obviously Wembanyama on the bottom left. Um, Incredibly undervalued because he's on that rookie contract. He's one of the greatest prospects that we've seen since who knows when, probably LeBron. Um, and then Denny Advia, Amen Thompson, I previously mentioned, Chet Holmgren. These are again rookie scale contracts, younger players that are performing well above, their rookie status. But they're probably, they're highly touted prospects. They're making impact from day one. They're not necessarily your second round pick rookie scale contract there. Um, we also see Shangun as being undervalued, along with Sabonis, Zion Williamson, Jaren Jackson, and Bam Adebayo. These are an interesting group because there's a lot of kind of talk about whether these guys are overrated or underrated in the current NBA. A lot of I think these four out of the five, three out of the five here are kind of highly debated as whether they're actually good or worth anything or not. I think Sabonis and the Kings, had a rough season this season. Obviously, Kevin Durant's burner account talking about Şengün, Zion Williamson's constant availability problems, although it was somewhat rectified this year. Um, just kind of talking about where are these guys in terms of whether they're worth what they're getting paid. Um, and according to this model, based on the stats here, they're undervalued, although be it, you know, um, about 5 million to 15 million dollars undervalued per year, which is a decent sum that can get you, a very solid role player, a very solid bench player with that difference. So, very interesting to look at here. It's also interesting to note that um, some places like the Kings, for example, are way under budget. I know that MPJ was on one of the earlier slides as well, and he's overvalued. Some of these places have money to spend, so they're willing to give a bigger contract, which is interesting. Um, it's interesting to see how places, even like the Kings, who would be willing to, they have not a lot of spending to be done on their team. Um, they still, uh, they still are paying Demontis Sabonis a premium, and he's still undervalued according to the model, which is very interesting. Very interesting here. Um, so yeah, that's the superstar bigs. Obviously, you can feel free to pause and look and find your favorite or least favorite player and make fun of them for being overvalued or undervalued. And yeah, let's move on. Yeah. So there's some model errors. So I'm a Cleveland Cavaliers fan, for better or for worse. Um, and this happened. This analysis was done before the Darius Garland trade for James Harden, so I don't have any data on that. But there's clearly some errors here in that Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley are both overvalued. Um, and maybe they are. And maybe that's a conversation we gotta have. But I don't know. I can't say that after Donovan Mitchell dropped like 41 in the second half last night. So tying a franchise or playoff record. But yeah, some model errors in that we're overvaluing two of my favorite players in the NBA. So, just kind of we got to be aware of that moving forward here. Um, uh, yeah, this is the fun surprise so that I get to complain that it hates my team. Um, cool. Okay, so takeaways. Um, Looking at the left side here, rookie contracts are super high value and drafting well, pretty important. I mean, we see Wembanyama, J-Dub, um, all those guys, all those young, uh, on the come up stars on the rookie scale contracts are very undervalued in terms of monetarily, which is important for maximizing your window, creating more opportunities by signing stars in the second apron, and before going into the second apron, excuse me. And then we have big contracts for superstars can change the course of a team, but it's not necessarily the most monetarily efficient. Like I said, with your Tyrese, your Cade, pick a star and name them. You can sign that player and change the course of your franchise. You can win a chip if you get Giannis, right? In the Giannis lottery, but it may not be the most monetarily efficient way to do it. Um, Not that there is probably a better way to do it, but and then we have some important factors down here. So I used a variety of factors. The three most important ones that we saw for high value players were game score, points, and field goals attempted. So these are the players that are adding the most to the team. Makes sense. Your shooters usually get a pretty high contract. Point scorers are valued more highly than defensive players. Um, think of the top outside of Wembanyama and Gobert. Some of the most highest paid players in the league are primarily offensive players. Because that's what gets looks, that's what gets seen, that's what generates the kind of uh, the excitement and the buzz. Um, and also wins games, but defense does too. I think defense is underrated, but that's a separate thought. And then some limitations here on the right side. So we're predicting salaries based on past performance, not future performance. So young stars that are on the come up, think, LaMelo Ball, your Denny Advias, your, whoever it may be, players that are ready to, could take that next step, and you could see them taking that next step, um, are maybe a little bit um, less valuable according to the model than they would be otherwise. Um, and then secondly, this doesn't account for external or off-court value. So a couple of things I thought of when I was just reading through this, and I mentioned these as well, but leadership, your veteran mentorship, your injury history, your age, all come into play when you're looking at these kind of contracts, but we didn't really consider those for this. Again, it was just box score, statistical analysis. Because if we introduce that, then it's kind of like a, well, I'll give LeBron a 5 for leadership because I like LeBron, but Katie gets a 0 for leadership because I hate him and he's the worst. Um, so we kind of eliminated that bias. We didn't really do that. Although moving forward, definitely could do that. Um, if we were to build another model, if you guys want to see another model, another one of these kind of analysis, maybe that'd be interesting. But that's the limitations of it. That's the takeaways, and that's all we've got. We're not going to give you guys opportunities for questions. Oh, well, I guess you can comment in the comment section. Shout out James Harden. Go Cavs. Um, I need the beard to be the beard and lock in, and Spider to be amazing as well. Hope you guys enjoyed this. A little bit different than normal. I know it's playoff season, so I'm really tapped in basketball right now. I've been watching a lot of content, so I figured I'd share this. It's pretty cool. Project that I did a little bit ago. And yeah, hope you guys enjoy. Have a good one.